This paper was presented at the JCT Traffic Signal Symposium 2025. Video coverage of this paper is provided by Highways News and sponsored by Mobius Networks, AGD, Smart Micro UK, TRL Software, Traffic Group Signals, AD Electronics, and Four-Way Consulting.
I'm going to kick things off and then hand over to Joel after a couple of slides. A quick introduction for anyone that's not familiar with VivaCity and what we do. So we make these fabulous looking AI-powered computer vision sensors. We run our own proprietary algorithm that we train in-house to give cutting edge levels of accuracy, collects plenty of data about how people are using the road network, and broadly split that into 3 different use cases. So traffic monitoring is the bread and butter of what we do, feeding into traffic planning use cases, traffic modeling, that kind of thing. Road safety, so trying to quantify the riskiness of different junctions and capture potentially unsafe interactions between vulnerable road users and other road users. And the thing that we're here to talk about today, and the thing that's most interesting to the people in this room, is the signal control side, so integrating with ITS systems to make use of this rich data. And very recently, Topaz registered, FYI. Okay, so we've got a long history with Leeds now. We've been working with Joel for 5 years, integrating with his ITS systems. We have a swathe of sensors across the town centre that hopefully people have seen whilst they've been out and about over the last couple of days. We've got nearly 200 areas of the road that we're analysing with a computer vision now, and in real time feeding that data into around 30 junctions locally in the controller, and also streaming multiple times per second the locations, speeds, classifications of every road user into Joel's bespoke in-house optimizer that he's building. I'll hand over to Joel to talk a little bit more about Leeds' priorities and how you're using the sensors to help achieve those.
So hopefully my mic's on and you can hear me. So yeah, Leeds, like a lot of other cities now, we have quite an ambitious transport strategy. And you can see in yellow the strapline, a city where you don't need a car. So I suppose my slight response to Steve from earlier is, we're not saying you can't have a car, but you don't need a car. And actually, there are still a lot of people who don't own a car, and we want an inclusive economy, inclusive growth, and we don't want to exclude people who don't have a car. So yeah, within that, obviously, we are looking at prioritising buses. If you don't know, Leeds' public transport is bus. We don't have anything else. We are hopefully going to get a tram, but this would be 3rd time lucky, so we'll see. But also, obviously, we've got walking and cycling are in there, and yeah, if you've been walking around, you'll have hopefully seen some of the cycle tracks. Some people do use them despite the negative press. So yeah. So what we're focusing on today is the walking aspect of that predominantly, and yeah, so we I suppose this is a bit of a flashy headline, but I think we've all probably heard the expression about for pedestrian crossings and push buttons being referred to as beg buttons or a placebo. And part of what we're trying to do with the transport strategy is, obviously, we are actually setting out the hierarchy, of road users, but it's about trying to make sure that people's perception reflects the hierarchy. And so I think it's probably worth pointing that out as we go through this. And then, obviously, in some situations, can you actually tune this so that pedestrians can cross without waiting at all? So, I'll just actually, for those with a keen eye, this is City Square. it's actually changed again since this. We're so keen on cycling infrastructure, we've done it twice. But this is when the road was still open in front of the Queen's Hotel. It's now closed, and this cycle track runs all the way through. So yeah, first point, improving safety. So obviously the other thing around push buttons is it's not always accessible for every road user. There's quite a lot of people with mobility issues, for example, find it difficult to reach a push button. We would like to reduce the waiting times. So something that we've already been doing in Leeds is and I know other areas have done it as well, but placing a demand from the curbside. But yeah, so with the idea being that you reduce the delay for pedestrians, and then trying to balance the demand. So if you can improve overall efficiency, where do you actually give that benefit? So the trial site that we're going to talk about today, those of you who came on the walking tour last night will have seen these two crossings, or Meadow Lane. As you go into the city centre from here, you would walk past those. And yeah, so it's quite a low trafficked piece of road. It's predominantly buses. The restrictions on Leeds Bridge, which is just north of that, are 7 till 7. So during those times, it's quite low traffic, but quite a lot of pedestrians, and it'll be increasing over time because of the huge amount of development work that's going on. So this is a coverage of the detection zones that the sensors are covering. So you can see that it's doing everything. It's doing the approaches, traffic approaches, it's doing the curb size. It actually covers the on-crossings, although we do back that up with conventional on-crossings because this generation of the sensors doesn't cover the topaz side of that. But it effectively does everything else. And for the evaluation of this, worth mentioning that those zones are also used to measure the delays. So I don't know, do you want me to do this slide?
Yeah,
yeah, okay, let's go. So with using the curbside demand feature with these sensors at these sites, because it's quite quiet traffic, you do get a high percentage of pedestrians that can cross without waiting. But what we found, and this is actually conventional curbside detection is notorious for then placing spurious demands. And we actually, a lot of the early sites that we did this, we had to switch that feature off. These sensors are much better for that, so you don't tend to get spurious demands, except for the fact that and so the spurious demands from the previous sort of generation of detection, I think it's worth saying you'd get it from shadows and all sorts of things. But this eliminates that, but you still get the issue of a pedestrian who's just walking down the pavement past a crossing, and they're in that zone for long enough to trigger the demand. So you put a call time in, say 3 or 4 seconds, to try and get around it, but some pedestrians obviously walk slower than that. And because you've put that call time in, it actually defeats the object, because the demand doesn't go in, so then people think they have to press the button anyway. So the point of this is, what could we do about that? So do you want to
wrap up this one? I'll pick up the next one.
Okay, so effectively, yeah. So this is just this issue around people walking past the crossing and triggering it. Could we anticipate which pedestrians are actually going to cross and only demand for those?
Thanks, Joel. So the approach that we took to trying to improve this and solve this problem is trying to infer whether a pedestrian is going to cross based on their recent direction. So the computer vision is capable of tracking a single object across frames. And if we look at the displacement across multiple frames, work out that vector, you can use that direction to make a guess at whether they're heading towards the crossing or just passing. So we implemented this. We did some trial and error with different values. We found that a wedge of about 120 degrees worked very well. So kind of the direction of the crossing plus or minus 60 degrees. And we would only insert a demand for those pedestrians heading in that direction over a number of frames, or any pedestrians that are stationary we'll insert a demand for as well. And hopefully we've got a video that's going to work, we'll see. Just to, I guess, explain what you're going to see before I run it. You'll see computer vision bounding boxes, so it's not video, it's just a still image, and then we're going to show what the computer vision is seeing overlaid on that. In the top right is the data that we're sending to the controller. The integration that we have with Swarco controllers, we're basically sending 4 numbers, which is the number of objects of 4 different classes or groups of classes. And it's the leftmost 0 is going to be the number of pedestrians. So what you should see is when a pedestrian is genuinely heading towards a crossing and wanting to use it, you should see that number go up. And you should see that we exclude any that head in the other direction or are just crossing sideways. So you can see a pedestrian approaching there, and the demand's gone in, which is great, and they cross without stopping. And then you can see that as the pedestrian leaves, heading away from the crossing, that will stay at 0, and we don't insert a false demand for that pedestrian. So this is the feature working, and it solves the problem that Joel was seeing with us calling the stage where it wasn't required. So the impact of this, Joel pulled the logs on stage appearance from UTC, and we saw that with this feature enabled, the amount of pedestrian stage calls reduced by 17% through the day, bringing a lot of green time back to traffic where there was no need to serve pedestrians that weren't actually looking to use the crossing. And in terms of the impacts this had on traffic delays, what we've got here, if you just mind your eyes, Joel, I'll try and use the pointer to see how this goes. So along the x-axis, these are just days, so each bar is an individual day. The light blue are before we made the change, and dark blue is after. And the height of the bar is the accumulated seconds of delay for different modes. So we've got general traffic at the top, we've got buses in the middle, and we've got pedestrians at the bottom. So what you can see is a very clear step change at the point that we made the change. So from the light blue to the dark blue, saving about 30 minutes of delay to general traffic, about 10 minutes per day to buses. And there is a disbenefit to pedestrians. As you'd expect, there'll be some pedestrians that will have just got lucky and turned up as that spurious demand had already gone in and the green had already come up. So there's a small disadvantage to pedestrians, but the benefits to buses and traffic here are more than double the disbenefit to pedestrians. And if we think in terms of an individual pedestrian's experience, what these numbers actually mean, we've dropped down to 88.5% of pedestrians still not having to break stride at all and still being able to cross without having to wait and use the push button. So still a very, very high level of service to pedestrians, just done in a way which is better balancing demand from conflicting modes. This graph is the proportion of pedestrians crossing without stopping at all by hour of day. So you can see that consistently through the day, we're up at around 90%, both before and after. So next steps with this, we're keen to try this in other places. Both across Leeds, we're looking to roll this out and try it in other places where there's an opportunity to prioritise pedestrians further, and also looking for other authorities and towns and cities to trial this. And this was done on our second generation version of our sensor, so we'll be looking to try it on our multi-view variant next. And Joel?
Yeah, so we actually, so very quick, just say we put, once we'd done this initial experiment, we put pre-time max on these crossings because this is the part of the rebalancing. What we found was actually there was very little difference, and that's predominantly because the sites are so quiet. Obviously it was changing in gaps anyway. The not surprising thing, I suppose, but just to note that the maximum waiting times didn't really come down either, because the times when it did run longer was when you had consecutive demands, and obviously pre-time max helps for the first pedestrian that arrives after a while, but with consecutive demands it will still then run the longer timer if you've got extensions. So we are going to do a little bit more work here. So we already do stuff with mover crossings where we use movers oversaturation flags to keep the wait time down for pre-time max until it flags oversaturation. We're going to do some similar sort of logic using the zonal occupancy feature of the sensors. So I think, yeah, I'll leave the other stuff if there's any questions, because I don't want to run over time, but there you go.
That's great, thank you. I didn't bribe for the mention of Swarco, by the way, that was totally organic. We've got a minute and a half for any questions. Mr. Plydell, if you're asking a question, if you could just wait for the microphone so the people outside can hear, that would be marvellous.
There's one thing in there I didn't understand. One thing I didn't understand. There are lots of things I didn't understand, but the one I want to ask you about. You said about pedestrians crossing without waiting. Do you mean crossing on green or non-compliant crossing as well? Because it wasn't clear to me whether pedestrians are rocking up, taking a look, getting lucky and going, I'm across, and there wasn't any correlation to the pedestrian signal state.
So can I take this one, John?
Yeah.
I think we're trying to deal with both. So the intention is that as a pedestrian approaches, we're inserting that demand as early as we can as they're approaching. So in an ideal world, if there was no traffic extending the traffic stages, we'd go straight to the pedestrian stage and they will get that green as they arrive, and that's perfect. I still think in the instance where someone's trying to cross in gaps, they see there's no traffic and they walk out without a green, it's still the best thing to do to try to give them that green and give them that protection, even if they've not asked for it. From a health point of view, I still think the right thing to do is try to do whatever we can to protect them in that situation.
I'm quite content with that. It was more a case of dividing the data into the two groups, crossing on green and crossing in anticipation, let's say, of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Got time for one more. So, Chris? We need some light music as they're walking around with the microphone.
Thank you. Chris Kennett of Chris Kennett Consulting Limited. Did you, where you've got such low traffic flow, did you give any consideration to resting on the PED stage and using your technology for pedestrian green extension, or otherwise roll quicker back to traffic? And in this case, do you think that might actually give you some traffic benefit as well as pedestrian?
Do you want to take this one? We were talking about it yesterday, weren't we?
I can take this one. So yes, it was going to be on my list, but I just thought I'll stop it there. So yeah, we've done that elsewhere actually in city centre. I think the only thing here is about making sure that if you are resting on green man, that if a bus is coming along, that you can detect it early enough to pull it out of that without delaying the bus. So there'd maybe be a bit of work in adding maybe some of the AVL data in just to get that extra distance on that actually you know a bus is coming. And part of that is because obviously with the puffin logic, if you haven't had anything triggering the on-crossings in the previous cycle, it'll then run the maximum clearance. So we just need to make sure that we've got far enough back that we can bring it back around in time. So yeah, absolutely something that we'll look to do, but a bit of extra work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and any further questions? I'm sure you'll both be available later. Joel and Andy, thank you very much.
Thank you.